I started out as a computer scientist at the NASA Ames Research Center. That was my first real career. Before that, I was a waitress and things like that. While I was studying in college, I saw
Mm,
that a lot of my problems were coming from stress and my
mm,
lack of trust in that God would provide for me and that He would bless my business. I
mm.
was worrying for no reason, staying up late at night for no good reason. I sat with my down jacket outside in the
Wow.
direct sun at 105-degree weather, and I was shivering and I was freezing. I was ready to
Mm,
divorce him because I felt like the stress of everything was not healthy for me, and that
sure.
if I do not get myself out of this situation, if something doesn't change, I'm probably going to die. I just found so much relief and support and healing and success in all of my endeavors, from entrepreneurship to marriage to parenting, everything, through
Nice.
this process.
Welcome to Leading the Way podcast, where you'll learn neuroscience backed ways to lead more effectively and have more fun at work with what you already have. Hey there, it's Chris. Welcome to another awesome episode of Leading the Way. I am so glad to have my amazing guest, Mayim Vega. Mayim, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Hello, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Hey, I'm going to tell everyone about you because you know about you and I know about you, but they don't yet. So let me do that and then we'll just jump right into our discussion. Friends, I want you to meet Mayim Vega. She's a former NASA computer scientist, and that alone is enough to just end the bio on right there. But she transformed her life to become a holistic life coach. And today she shares her powerful insights through something she calls the Valor Success Method. And we're going to talk about finding your North Star on this podcast a lot too. Her story began with health challenges and a quest to discover her purpose, which inspired her to build this unique approach to life that combines health and finances and relationships and personal growth, all of it, right? Your whole life. Now, her path has not been easy. As a young entrepreneur, she battled debilitating migraines and later found herself navigating some relationship challenges in her marriage. These experiences fueled her passion to create a coaching program that guides others to align with their values, build strong relationships, and uncover their true purpose and calling. Now she's dedicated to helping clients unlock their potential by focusing on the core areas that drive holistic success. Again, Ma, I'm so glad to have you here. And right before the podcast, we were talking about all the things that are going on right now. There's always stuff going on in life, but it's an election year, so all that drama's up. Unemployment's high. All the normal stressors are there. There's a season change. There's a lot going on. How do you find your calling and your North Star when all that noise is up in your business, as it were?
In my business. Oh, okay. So we're talking about how I came to do what I do right now and be what I am right now.
Right.
And my business is really, what I always like to say is I do everything actually for my children. As a mother, that's how I've operated ever since I had my first child. I started out as a computer scientist at the NASA Ames Research Center. That was my first real career. Before that, I was a waitress and things like that while I was studying in college for computer science. But my first actual real job in programming was at NASA. I was an
Mm,
intern first, and then I heard that you could possibly get hired after your internship. And I was talking to some colleagues, and they're like, "Oh, that's very rare." And I'm like, "Could be me. I'm smart." At least I've
right.
been told. And I prayed. I'm a very religious person. I prayed about it, and I got the job. And so I was there for several years. And then I got married in 2003.
Mm,
And 9 months later, I had my first baby. And I have seven now of my own.
wow.
And I took the regular 6 months off. That's the maximum that you can take off in at least in California,
Okay.
protected, with your job protected. I know you can take a lot more off in Europe, I think, and even as a man. And I remember we were working with one of our clients in Europe, and he was an executive officer, but he had to take 6 months off, or else I guess society would look down on him
How
if he
different
didn't.
that is.
Yeah, but he tried to pop him every once in a while. But anyways, that's a different story. So I took the 6 months off, and then I went back to work, And NASA had a really great program where their daycare center was right next to the security gate. So as soon as I left the security gate at NASA, I could breastfeed my baby real quick and then come back and work, or I could pump my milk and then feed him and come
Right.
back. It was really nice. It was a really nice setup, but it didn't feel natural.
Mm.
So eventually I was like, I want to be with my baby. I'm like, what animal in nature has a child and then puts them in the care of strangers
Right.
for the majority of their childhood? I'm like, that doesn't happen. I'm like, this is not natural.
Right.
So I decided to quit my career, basically, not just my job in ESSA, but my career, and
Mm.
become a work from home mom. Because when I told my husband about it, he's like, you make too much money. We can't afford that. We lived in the Silicon Valley, and it's even more expensive today.
Yeah.
I heard once that it was the most expensive place to live in America, at least in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, because that's where all
Right.
those tech giants are, Google and Netflix and Cisco and all that. He didn't want me to quit. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna work from home. I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. And he's, do you know anything about it? And I'm like, no. We didn't know any entrepreneurs in our lives.
Mm.
Because I have a lot of faith. I'm like, if it can be done, I can do it, and God will see me through.
Mm.
Why not?
Right.
And so it was because of my child, really, and my deep inner desire to be with him. I guess I followed my heart in that
Yeah.
instance. And I took the gamble, and they said that it takes about 3 years to make it in business. And if you can hit that 3 year mark, we've made it. And that's exactly what happened to me. 3 years, I was barely breaking even. And then
Mm-hmm.
after 3 years, shortly after, 6 figures, surpassed my income at NASA. So
Nice.
great. But along the way, I faced a terrible health crisis, which I thought I was on my deathbed. I couldn't do business anymore. I couldn't, even though it was on the phone and on the computer and stuff like that, I couldn't function. And
Yeah.
I couldn't take care of I had 2 children at that time. I couldn't take care of them anymore properly. But the final straw was, and this was just it in a span of maybe 2 months. It happened pretty quickly, gradually,
Mm.
but quickly. The final straw was when I couldn't sleep anymore. I was like, I can't even
Oh,
sleep anymore. I'm in too much pain.
yeah.
And so I asked my husband to rush me to the emergency room, and
Mm.
they took a bunch of tests, and the doctor initially thought that I had a brain tumor. But then after full evaluation, a CT scan, she's, good news, there's nothing wrong with you.
Uh-huh.
Bad news, you have a really bad headache and we cannot help you. We can't figure it out. We can't figure out what's wrong. Here's some really strong painkillers, it's Valium, and bye. So I'm like, wow, that's crazy. How many hundreds of thousands of dollars went into that system, into the education of the doctors and the nurses, and the expensive medical equipment and the building and everything? How much money is pumping into that system, and yet they could offer me no answers? So I took the painkillers. Again, they weren't really addressing the root cause. They weren't really helping me. And so this was back in the day when I trusted Google, which
Mm.
I no longer really trust Google, especially for medical information. Even alternative, oh, sorry. Yeah, you could trust them for medical information if you want that, but modern medical information. But
I
if you
see.
want holistic, traditional, root cause type healing methods, I absolutely don't trust Google. But back then, when it was trustworthy, I did Google a few things, and I found out that it said to try B12. So I was like, oh, B12, that's really easy to get. So I went to the
Mhm.
store and I got B12, and I found out that right away, as soon as I took B12, my migraines would disappear. So I'm like, wow,
Nice.
how come a doctor couldn't tell me that? And it doesn't work for everyone, but how simple it is to say, here, try some B12. Sometimes people need magnesium. Sometimes people need different things to help them. Sometimes it's just as simple as correcting a nutritional deficiency. And it was at that time for me, or quitting a bad habit. And it was for me. But still, again, I wasn't satisfied with that answer. And it wasn't really dealing with the root cause, because I'm like, why do I? Because they still kept coming. They still kept coming.
Mm.
And I would take B12 and it would help, but sometimes it wouldn't as much. It was something. It was better than all the painkillers that I was getting from the modern medical
Right.
system.
Right.
So that's when I decided to enroll in certification programs in nutrition, herbalism, and holistic health. And the truth is that my first program, which taught me nutrition, it was bad. It wasn't
Mm.
bad. It was bad for me. It
Okay.
taught a lot of good things, but it pushed vegetarianism and veganism,
Mm.
which I was an aspiring vegan at that time. I was
O-
vegetarian, I was vegan.
Okay.
And I had to later learn after that. I continued learning after my certification program. And I found out, I discovered the work of a two-time, no, excuse me. It was, who do I want to conjure up right now in my field? It was a holistic dentist. I'm sorry, his name escapes me now,
Okay.
but he traveled all around. Oh, now I remember. Dr. Weston A. Price. Okay, Dr. Weston A. Price. I don't know if you are familiar with him.
No, not.
He's a doctor. He specialized in dentistry. And there's
Mm.
another doctor also. His name was Albert Schweitzer. He was a doctor, but he was a missionary. But they both did very similar things. They traveled all around the world
Mm.
and they helped Native people. And Dr. Weston A. Price, he was more there for research, while Albert Schweitzer, he was more of a missionary trying to help these tribes.
Okay.
But they both saw how these Native people ate. Okay.
Mm.
And how did they eat? They ate mostly meat diet. They hunted.
Okay.
They
Right.
hunted, and that provided the bulk of their diet. They hunted their own fresh grass fed. They feed themselves. Yeah,
Right.
no hormones, high quality meat that they hunted themselves.
Right.
And they also had fruits and vegetables which they foraged. They didn't really
Mm.
grow them. They just
Okay.
foraged them. So it was whatever was available to them locally,
Mm.
and a little bit of honey. So only a little bit of sweets when they could find a hive once in a while. And that
Wow.
was their diet. And their lifestyle was they lived out in nature and they
Mm.
spent a lot of time in the fresh air and the sunshine. So they were getting lots of vitamin D.
Right.
And so they found that they had perfect health. And Dr. Weston A. Price found that they had perfect dental health, even though they didn't even brush their teeth, but
Right.
their teeth were not misaligned and they didn't have
Hmm.
any cavities. And that was probably for me the most surprising thing. But also, they didn't have the chronic diseases that we have in the Western world.
Mm.
They certainly didn't have chronic migraines,
Right.
but they also were free of heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, all of those things.
Wow.
And Dr. Weston A. Price in his book, so he has a book, I think it's Nutrition, I think it's called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. I believe that's the
Okay.
title of the book, but Dr. Weston A. Price is the author. And he talks about how when these native peoples, when they started entering into the Western modernized world,
Mm-hmm.
then they started developing and getting the same types of diseases that we get here in our modern westernized world, all the metabolic
Mm.
diseases, all the issues that they get.
Mm.
And so he concluded that it was their diet, and I believe it was greatly diet, but it's also lifestyle. I think that back in his day, lifestyles, even back in his day, weren't as so far removed as we are. We're
Right.
much more indoors, exposed to EMFs with our electronics. There's a lot more pollutants and toxins in our clothes, in our lotion, in our carpets and rugs, and in our cars.
Mm.
Just everything is sprayed with flame retardant things that are bad for our hormones and are toxic for our livers and all that kind of stuff. So they didn't live in
Right.
the same kind of environment that we do today.
Mm.
And that's a lot. But one of the key things that I learned from there is that number one, I shouldn't be aspiring vegan. That is not the ideal diet. That is a test. That is not an experiment. There, that's the word.
Sure. Sure.
Veganism is a modern day experiment.
Sure.
I was talking to a naturopath once, and he's saying that there are no truly vegan societies historically in the world, except for one that he knew of, one Indian community who was vegan for religious reasons, but they didn't wash their fruits and vegetables. So they were
Mm.
getting the bacteria and the feces and maybe dead bugs and things like that from their healthy probiotics, basically,
Sure.
from their garden grown, community grown fruits and vegetables. So then I started getting into the root cause. And so I was like, okay, I need to stop my vegan diet. And I wasn't ready to incorporate meat because the truth is I call it a cult now. That can be offensive to many people who are of this religion. And I have a lot of friends that are still in that religion. But, and there's a healthy way to be in that religion.
Yeah.
But when you follow any religion really in a cultish way,
Mm,
and the traditional definition of the word cult is just merely it's centered around a figure, right?
right.
And so I'm Jewish, and our cult, so to speak, is centered around Moses, right? And then the
Sure.
Christian religion is centered around Jesus. In the Seventh-day Adventist religion, it's centered around it. It's supposedly centered around Jesus, but oftentimes it can be centered around their modern day prophet, which is Ellen White. And
Sure.
she has a lot of writings that promote veganism to the
Right.
point where she says that people who are serious about getting to heaven will stop eating animal products.
Wow.
And I think I'm just religious by nature, meaning I'm very spiritual. And so I followed her words as close as I could. And that was basically what contributed, one of the major factors that contributed to my illness. I don't think I've ever shared that before.
Yeah, no, that's
But
powerful.
because it can be insulting to a lot of people, a lot of friends and family. It was becoming Jewish and entering into the Jewish religion where we're almost commanded, not really commanded, but we're highly encouraged to eat meat at least every Shabbat, because it's
Right.
understood as this holiday that happens every week, and we should be eating the finest foods and the richest foods, which is like meat and wine. Not that I overdo it. I just have maybe half a glass of wine or something like that on Friday
Right.
night. But and not only me, but I've seen a lot of people who have found healing through, because I have a lot of vegan Adventist friends, and not just Adventist friends, but because I was in the vegetarian vegan type of movement, I just had a lot of friends who were vegan, and a lot of people that they started getting autoimmune
100%.
issues
Yep.
because of long-term veganism. I have a friend who was vegan, pretty much not vegan, vegetarian pretty much from childhood. And then
Wow.
she became a health coach or health consultant, and then she started getting sick. And it wasn't until she started incorporating animal products again that she started getting better. So that
Sure.
was one factor. But then another factor was in dealing with the root cause was, and this is when I started becoming, I would guess, I maybe breaking out of Adventism and just exploring the Bible on my own, not
Hmm.
the way someone else was telling me
Right.
to read it. When I started doing that, then I also just started deepening my personal relationship with God, and I saw that
Mm,
a lot of my problems were coming from stress and my lack
mm,
of trust in that God would provide for me and that he would bless my business. I
mm.
was worrying for no reason, staying up late at night for no good reason. There's actually a verse in the Bible that says something about how, why do you stay up late at night? Don't you know that it's God that provides for you? You don't need to do that. And I'm like,
Mm.
wow, okay. It's very hard for me because I'm a workaholic. I'm a perfectionist, all these things. So it's very hard
Right.
for me to let go sometimes. But that was one of the root causes. So those two things put together, I discovered, and I found healing. And
Mm.
because I had to find it myself, I was like, how many other people have to go through the kind of journey that I had to go through, figuring it out by themselves, because the modern medical system could not
Right.
find
It just tells you to
relief
take
for
more
them.
pills. Here's a blood
Yeah.
test and take the more pills.
So in 2009, I started aruka.com, arukah.com. That was where I started helping people, coaching them with holistic approaches to whatever they were facing. And I take a very holistic approach. I ask them
Mm.
about their diet, their lifestyle, their supplements, their medications, their mindset, their relationship, their environment, all sorts of different things.
Right.
And just like me, it's not just one thing usually that is contributing. It's many things that are contributing to illness and suffering, or at least prolonging it or aggravating it. And
Right.
so I started helping people with that. And so that's one way. It's like my North Star redirected me. Okay,
Yeah.
first you're going to be an entrepreneur, because it was very easy for me to transition from NASA to digital marketing for high tech companies,
Sure. Okay.
as a programmer, as a computer scientist. That was
Right.
very easy to do. And I did it all for my children. And then becoming a holistic healer, I wanted to heal myself again, because the primary thought that was on my mind was, I need to be there for my children. I need to be functional for them. I need to stay
Right.
alive for them. And so that's what pivoted me into holistic health and healing.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I became very sick once again. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I thought I was on my deathbed. I got severe hypothyroidism,
Okay.
and my symptoms were so severe that I live in Texas. So in Texas, it's not uncommon to have 105-degree weather all summer long around that temperature.
Sure.
And it hit me very suddenly this one day. I always had very mild hypothyroid symptoms, like maybe from college. Like my oldest daughter now, actually, too, she found out when I had my hypothyroid journey that she also had that. But nothing ever like this happened, which was when one day I just got cold all of a sudden. It
Mm.
was around noon. It was in Texas, and it was already reaching 100 degrees, or it already was maybe going past at that time. And I became freezing cold for some reason.
Wow.
And so I became so freezing cold that I'm like, okay, I need to go outside. And I was shivering like I was having seizures. It was intense.
Yeah.
And I had already spent like maybe, I don't remember the exact count, but maybe 16 years free from the modern medical system, free from
Wow.
drugs, doctor visits, hospital visits. And I had built my business around this whole idea of I can overcome everything holistically and naturally. Now, of
Mm.
course, this doesn't include emergency situations. Two of my
Right.
children broke a bone, and we rushed into the emergency room because I can't do that with herbs and
Right.
vitamins
Right.
and
Right.
supplements.
Bone needs to be set in a cast and all that. Sure.
But almost everything else we've dealt with by ourselves the holistic way. And so my husband's, I think this is one of those times that we should get you to the emergency room. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, not yet.
Okay.
Let's
Okay.
see. Yeah, we'll see. And so he gave me my down jacket that I usually use only when I go back to California to play in the snow. I
Sure.
got that jacket out, and I asked him to make me some hot tea. And so I sat with my down jacket outside in the
Wow.
direct sun at 105-degree weather, and I was shivering and I was freezing, and it took me maybe half an hour to be normal again.
Wow.
And that just it started happening. So that would happen like every few days. And I also had my kidney started bleeding. So I had
Mm.
bleeding from my kidney. But when I tested for UTI, that was negative, and I didn't have kidney stones.
Okay.
So it was uh, pretty unexplainable. And I also, again, had got severe migraines. And it was actually my husband that diagnosed me. He's also very holistic minded. He Adventists are very holistic minded to begin with.
Sure.
So he grew up that way before
Okay.
we became Jewish. And so he figured out that while I was having seizures, almost seizures in my bed, he figured out that I had hypothyroidism. And it was not an official diagnosis because he's not a doctor, but we were pretty
Right.
sure. And so we proceeded treating myself as though I had hypothyroidism. So one
Okay.
of the first things that I remembered through my studies is that the carnivore diet is
Mhm.
something that has helped a lot of people with autoimmune disorders, including hypothyroidism. And there's a famous influencer by the name of Michaela Peterson, who is Jordan B. Peterson's daughter. And she had hypothyroidism ever since she was a child. And she started what she called, I think, the lion's diet.
Mhm.
And she just ate steak every single day.
Right.
And I didn't do exactly that. I followed Dr. Paul Saladino's version loosely with some modifications. So basically, I ate meat. Lots of red meat was really the key. I didn't feel good unless it was red meat, but
Okay.
also a little bit of chicken and lots of eggs. Also a little bit of rice. I didn't forsake carbs. It was very hard to fill myself up and have energy without just a little bit of rice. I also ate fruits, including non-sweet fruits. So like berries, bananas, but also zucchini, avocado. So variety of fruits, but lots of red meat and also broth, homemade broth. And that really was one of the things, and one of the only things I knew in the beginning that started slowly nursing me back to health.
Mm.
And then I was looking up different supplements that I could take. And one of the supplements that stood out was iodine, but it was highly controversial. If
Mhm.
you Google search, will say that iodine is dangerous and things like that, and be very, very careful. Don't take too much.
Right.
But the holistic healers that I had been accustomed to listening to, because they had worked for me and my students and clients in the past, they said lots of iodine, load it
Mm.
up.
Mm.
And so I started with just a very little, and I got this thing called the iodine Bing, which is, imagine you've been in a dark tunnel for months,
Mm-hmm.
like some of the hostages of the October 7th
Sure.
kidnapping in
Sure.
Israel right now. And then all of a sudden, you finally come out, and there's just blinding light and just
Mm.
the overwhelming feeling of this sensation. It almost mentally hurts, not physically hurts, but it mentally hurts. So I experienced this
Wow.
iodine Bing, but it was overpowering, but I also felt that it was exactly what I needed. It was
Okay.
just so strong because I was so deficient that I could only handle just like one little drop,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Okay.
And now I'm up to, what is it, 40 drops per day.
Oh, wow.
Whereas,
Okay.
whereas before, Lugol's 2.5, 2% solution, just in case anyone wants to know that.
Okay.
And so I've slowly worked my way up to that. And now my thyroid levels are normal. There's no indication that I have any hypothyroidism. I tell that story very quickly, but it took me a few years to figure out all the pieces of the puzzle and adjust the dosages and adjust my diet so that it was just perfect.
Mm.
But through this journey, it wasn't just that, because that's, again, iodine really is one of the root causes of hypothyroidism, the lack of it. But
Okay.
another contributing factor is stress.
Sure.
And the stress that I was feeling at that time was the addition of two children in our family,
Mm.
adopted children, which we didn't adopt. It was actually my husband's mother that adopted them, and we had agreed to take care of them after she passed away. But
Mm.
we saw that they were not being educated, not just academically, but just basic fundamental things that you would teach like a little child, maybe a toddler, things
Sure.
like that, that they weren't receiving the proper education and care that they
Mm.
needed, because she was too old. It was just very
Mm-hmm.
hard for her. She was not strong enough anymore to do that. So we decided to take them on early,
Mm.
and I homeschool. So I that became 9 that I was now responsible for.
Wow.
Now at that time, and I was still running my business. So in my faith, I believe that God, that everything in your life is for the good,
Mm.
even the bad is
Okay.
ultimately for the good. It's
Okay.
going to test you and challenge you and strengthen you and give you this new challenge, this new skill that you didn't yet have.
Right.
And so when they first came on, it was very stressful because they didn't know how to be a part of our family, and we didn't know how to help them. And I also felt like I didn't have the proper support and help from my husband. Um, and our marriage faced its second crisis. We had another marriage crisis also. And I was ready to leave him. I was ready to
Mm.
divorce him because I felt like the stress of everything was not healthy for me. And that
Sure.
if I do not get myself out of this situation, if something doesn't change, I'm probably going to die. That's just how I felt.
Mm.
And we had a strange experience with a marriage therapist in the past, a licensed marriage therapist in the past. So we decided to try marriage coaching this
Okay.
time. And our coaches were not licensed therapists, but they were ministers. And
Mm. Okay.
so we took, it was coaching, but there was also a spiritual aspect to it, which we received from them, which was perfect, which is exactly what we needed. And so
Yeah.
they taught us how to be on the same team and communicate better.
Mm.
And this whole philosophy of different families, it's like they're coming from different sports teams.
Right.
And then you separate from those two sports teams to create a new team. Well, you have different playbooks and you have different strategies, and you have to blend them. You can't, what we were trying to do is I guess we were trying to push our own way on each other. But instead, we had to learn, no, we've got to create a new strategy, a new game plan, because this is a new team.
Right.
We're different team players, him and I
Yeah.
and our children. We have to create new strategies. What do we need? And we've got to work through this together.
Mm.
Um, and so that was very helpful. That helped not only with hypothyroidism, that also helped with our marriage, and it helped
Sure.
with just all of our family dynamics. And another thing that happened through that is I got personal life coaching.
Mm,
And this life coaching wasn't focused on just my health, or because I could do that on my own, the health aspect.
right.
But just any problem that I needed to deal with that day, whether it was my business, my children, my marriage, I could bring it to her. It was several people. It was usually a woman. I preferred a woman. I could bring it to that person and just help me process my thoughts, give me space to really think about it, give me unbiased opinions, help me redirect and reframe my problems. And I just found so much relief and support and healing and success in all of my endeavors, from entrepreneurship to marriage to parenting, everything, through
Nice.
this process. And I was like, this needs to be part of my coaching business and my coaching method. And that's why I added the life coaching aspect,
Nice.
and I became also not just a naturopathic herbalist, but also a holistic life coach.
Nice.
So I feel like I following my North Star just is part of being honest and true to my journey, what my needs are, what my family's needs are, what my
Mhm.
children's needs are, my marriage's needs are. And after receiving help and wisdom and guidance, just naturally sharing it to the world in
Right.
the best way that I know how.
That's so lovely. And I was just thinking that as you're talking about that, every challenge you've experienced, you took care of yourself first, your family first, then figure out like, how can I serve others? And I'm putting words in your mouth so they don't have to go through the same thing, right? So it's there for
So they don't
them.
have to take as long, so they don't
Right.
have to suffer as much,
Right.
figure things out as much. A coach is so helpful for that.
And it's also interesting too that you had the really strong recognition of these challenges we face. All of them made you stronger, but that also gave you content to serve other people with. If you didn't have migraines and you didn't have hyperthyroidism and didn't have these things, there were,
Hypothyroidism, sorry.
sorry, I said it wrong. Hyperthyroidism.
Hypo.
Hypo.
It's the
Hypo.
opposite of hyperthyroidism.
Okay,
So
got it. Got it.
okay,
Hypo. All
sorry.
right. Thank you. No, don't be sorry. I appreciate it. All those challenges and hardships, which at the time had to be awful, right? And at the time, no one was like welcoming, but you went through them, you learned from them, you found a way to make it better and not just cover up and struggle through it, but let's fix this and share it with others. And I think it's just lovely. It's an amazing thing. And not everyone does that, right? A lot of folks can just be an autopilot in their own little world and forget that we're connected in that way. So on behalf of humanity, thank you for
Yeah.
showing up that way.
Yes, absolutely.
It's an amazing way to be. As you see your clients, it must be a discovery process, right? To really understand what's going on for them, because you're looking at everything. A lot of even a naturopathic doctor, they're sometimes all they do, and I'm not being mean to them, but they're going to look at blood levels and what you eat, and let's get you on a regimen of vitamins and supplements and things like that, and kind of course correct. But they're not going to necessarily ask what's going on in your marriage, what's going on in your relationships, how's your business going, how are you feeling, like what's your direction. And so it's interesting you do all of it together in one place because that's rare. Usually you need to go.
That's what a life coach is, purposefully a generalist. And
Yeah,
people always say that's bad, but sometimes that's exactly what you need. You don't
right,
I don't want to have to find a marriage coach and then
right.
find this other an entrepreneurial coach and then find a blah blah blah.
And then get them all to work together and talk, which is a whole other thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really
There's and it's not that I don't go to specialists for certain things, but having a life coach on your side is so valuable. It's so
right.
precious.
No, I love that. And the other is there are going to be other challenges that we probably aren't aware of. Some folks are amazingly spiritual and know that thing's coming, but for most of us, it's a surprise, a disease or a life issue or an event, or as my mom used to say, life happens is coming at us. And sometimes we don't have in the moment the capability, the strength, the resilience to handle that. Then it's testing and pushing on us to grow. And without that help of a life coach, of a naturopath, I think folks get stuck in fight, flight, freeze, right? And can get really primitive in their response versus how can we fix this? How can we resolve this? How can we move forward? It's a very different approach. And it's different than what the Western world teaches as well, right? We're taught to eat whatever you want. Certainly couldn't be the food. They're never at risk. And there are all these addictive foods with fast food and everything else that creates unhealthiness. And then the scroll on our phones can get addicted to that dopamine hit. And we're surprised we're unhappy and lonely and unhealthy. It's interesting. I'm curious, you've chosen a different lifestyle than some, right? From your faith, from homeschooling, from the number of children you have is different than the number of others. Do you feel ever judged or pressure from society to conform to that? Or you're just so solid, this is who I am, this is who I want to be? That doesn't even come up.
My immediate family would
Yeah.
always joke around and say, hey, you could just put a TV in your bedroom.
Oh, geez.
Or like things like that.
Yeah.
But as far as an entrepreneur, I think that most people, most of my friends at least that I know, admire that
Right.
everything that I've been able to achieve because I'm living the dream, right? I'm working less hours, making more per hour, and I'm here. I can homeschool my children. It's amazing. And my oldest, by the way, is going to be 21 soon. So I'm not homeschooling him anymore. But even when he was in college, it was pretty much the same thing because after age maybe around in middle school, I'm not really teaching them much. I'm mentoring them
Okay.
and I'm encouraging them and I'm supporting them and I'm just making sure they stay on task. I'm not really teaching
Right.
them. Once they learn how to read, they become very independent. But I still had to make sure he was waking up on time. And when people see my children, they're like, "Your children are awesome." Like
Yeah.
our friends are like, "I want my children to hang out with your children so that they will influence them and they will be like them when they grow up." And I
Mm,
have a great relationship with them. I
nice.
didn't have to kick them out at age 18,
Right.
which a lot of parents do because they have not properly trained their children to get along with them. And we share the same values because I homeschooled them, but not only homeschooled them, but I made sure that I communicated my values to them.
Mm,
And we did things as a family. We did things together. We continue to do things together.
mm,
That's part of what I love about being Jewish is every Saturday is family time. We
right.
set it apart and it's holy. It's holy for God and family.
Sure. Yeah,
And
I've traveled to Israel for work and I was really struck by the Sabbath and how strong that is and the tradition of family and everything else. And being an outsider, not having the family there, how welcoming they were to me. Okay, come join if you want to. It's very interesting for those that are outside of that world, not knowing it and just go through the weekend doing chores and autopilot versus really making time for that community and family. It's
yes, it makes life rhythmic instead of like just sporadic or constant. There's a rhythm. And
mm,
so with rhythms, it gets easier to do things because you naturally have something at the end to look forward to. So you've got the
yeah,
high and then you go down and you go back up. So it's a beautiful cycle. And because I'm Jewish, actually in the Jewish religion, having lots of children, yes, it's like Catholicism. I
sure.
was like, yeah, and Islam also. Yeah, have as many babies as you can. So I'm not looked down. And also now we moved from California to Texas. So Texas also has a lot of religious people who have a lot of kids. So I'm not, yeah, back in California, it was like, whoa, you have 4 kids.
Right.
But and when we moved to Texas, we only had 4 kids at the time. They're like, oh, you only have 4 kids. Yeah. And
Nice.
in Israel, it's, oh, yeah. So you got a medium-sized family also. Israel even more.
Sure.
Israel, I remember late at night after Shabbat was over, we'd go downtown and there'd be families of 10 going out at night together, walking the streets. You don't
Yeah.
see that in San Francisco or Dallas. So I think the thing that maybe that I might get the most flack for from friends is
Yeah.
my probably I have a quite radical approach to health and healing to the point where I really do try to avoid doctors and drugs a lot. And
Sure.
some people are scared of that.
Mm.
Some people like that. Some people are scared of that. I think that's what I probably get the most flack for, especially because I have a lot of friends that are doctors. So
Oh,
they're
wow.
either on my side
Right.
and they're like, yes, this is the right way, or not that they will still use the medical system too, but they are on my side in terms of all the holistic nutritional and herbal
Mm-hmm.
approaches.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're like, we can't talk about it when we're together, or else it might cause a problem in our relationship. So it's either one or the other usually.
Sure. It makes sense too. If it's pushing on what they're trained in and what their belief system is, and whatever that belief system is, it's my parents used to say, we don't talk about religion or politics. It's the same sort of thing. It's like, if it's pushing on that.
That's all I talk about: religion, politics,
Yeah,
holistic
exactly.
health.
That's awesome. I love it. We'll put the link in the show notes. So if folks are listening or driving or anything else, don't hurt yourself while we're talking about health. But can you talk a little bit about, do you have a common approach with your clients, like a phases you go through or things you do, or is it just wide open and you start with what their needs are?
Yes, I have different types of clients, right? First is the health coaching type clients. And I said previously everything that I asked them about, initial assessment, and then we deal with those. And then we get into some life coaching topics. And then I have other people who maybe, by the way, I'm ordained as a spiritual, it's not rabbi, the title's not rabbi. I would say spiritual guide or teacher in the Jewish faith. So sometimes people come to me because, again, I have a religious background. So they'll come to me for marriage coaching.
Sure.
Or sometimes parenting, or some probably maybe my study clients, they're just helping them get through different relationships. It could be business relationships, family relationships, those types of issues. I think those are probably the most common things that I help people with.
Nice. Nice. And we'll have ways to contact you so folks can find that. Great discussion. And it's just, I'm really impressed by, in spite of kind of what life has come at you with, your resiliency and your resolve and your incredible success. You shared before the call, you have children that, if I got it right, if I remember right, are graduating college in their early 20s, right? And starting school earlier.
He's 19, actually.
19. Wow.
Computer science degree at Nate, because I started him at 16. When you
Amazing.
homeschool in Texas, you can do whatever you want.
Wow. Wow. And that's a big wow, even if you had just one kid and you have 9 and all the things you're working through.
Yeah. And he's an entrepreneur now also. So building up his business, and nice. I instilled that dream in him.
That's beautiful. I love it. Listeners, I hope you reach out to Mayim because she's incredibly talented, as you've heard, and has gone through a lot of things that maybe you're going through, and this speaks to you and would be a great service to you. Before we close out, I ask all my guests, what's something you're grateful or thankful for today?
Yes. I would love to close by saying that I believe that God has truly helped me achieve holistic success. And I define that in 4 areas. With my health, He's helped me overcome 2, I believe, life-threatening issues in my life, in my relationships with my children, as well as my marriage. And that's an accomplishment these days, especially with the divorce rates being as they are. And also with my business and helping others and serving others in that way. And finally, my personal and spiritual development in life. And I just feel enriched in all areas. And I believe that to truly find purpose and joy, you have to focus on all 4 of these areas.
Absolutely. Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you again. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. And the biggest thing you can do as a friend is sometimes share things. So if this speaks to you or a friend this would really serve, get brave and share it with them because they'll appreciate it. And I'm not just doing it for likes. I really mean this from the heart. You probably know someone that's going through some struggles, and to listen to this could help them out. So please do share. And it's one way to show your love and caring for them, and keep leading the way. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Leading the Way podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss other great episodes like this one. And if you're ready for more in your workplace, be sure to go to aintent.com. You'll find lots of free tools, assessments, and ways to engage directly with us to get your own epic results. We'll see you there.